Well, in 4 months, the governing ANC gets to elect leadership at their national elective conference. As nominations open next week, there are all kinds of conversations in and outside the party. Treasurer General Paul Mashatile, who's currently acting in 2 other capacities, seems to be at the center of all of this. Let's speak to political analyst now, Lukhanyo Vangqa. Lukhanyo, good morning and thank you very much for your time. Now, nominations officially open on the 7th of September, but it already seems like a picture of who the front runners might be starting to emerge. But interestingly, this time, unlike 2017, we're not seeing a proliferation of candidates for the president position. It's as if there is some sort of one slate with everyone competing for the other top 5 positions, but mostly contested is the one of deputy president. What do you make of all of this?
Well, there ought to be 2 slates, Mfundo, but the RET faction is very disorganized, and you remember I've been raising this issue before that they don't have a presidential candidate, which means that they don't have a slate when that happens. The slate of Cyril Ramaphosa has a problem. It has 2 complications on it. The first complication is the position of deputy president, where there's a proliferation of a number of candidates that are vying for that position from his own faction. The second complication is that of Gauteng. Gauteng is looking like it wants a lot of positions for itself as one province, and that would complicate the faction of Cyril Ramaphosa because it still needs to accommodate the other provinces. But Gauteng seems like it wants to take 50% of the top 6 positions because they want Makura as SG, they want Paul Mashatile as deputy president. You have Soweto that wants Lukhanyo Kubayi as deputy president as well. You have others that are from Gauteng are nominating Sisulu. So the Gauteng is a complication for Cyril Ramaphosa.
But then if we had to go back to the contestation around the deputy position, what does it say about the incumbent? Have perhaps some within the ANC established that he cannot fully rely on the Mpumalanga vote for now, because many of us would say we're none the wiser. They haven't necessarily expressed themselves as a province as yet, even informally, around this matter of the top 6.
That's very true. And David Mabuza, the cat, has always been a complication or sort of an unexpected, surprise, dark horse sort of candidate. And that's how he came, to that position in Nasrec. He was not part of the CR17 faction. However, he emerged to deputize Cyril Ramaphosa. So he's always been a very wild card sort of candidate. And it would not be in anyone's best interest to underestimate David Mabuza. And also you must understand that fortune always favors the incumbent. And he's one of the leading candidates. I would put it like that as well. But it's a complication that he doesn't seem to have the support of Mpumalanga, because Mpumalanga, the previous conference that it went to, it seemed like it was won by people that David Mabuza did not personally endorse. But I think he still has the support to an extent of Mpumalanga.
To an extent, meaning which regions in Mpumalanga right now? Because if we remember and we go back to 2017, you state that he wasn't part of the CR slate. So what he came with was a solid block, because that was that era of sort of strongman politics where you had the provincial leaders being able to consolidate power. So he came with a solid block. But this time around, even if he's not on a slate now, without a voting bloc that he brings to the table, how then would he find himself retaining that position?
Yes, he still has support from Mpumalanga. You look at the Nkomazi region in Mpumalanga, they seem to still be behind him. You look at the deputy provincial secretary of Mpumalanga, they seem to support him. You look at the faction that lost Ngomane, they still seem to be supporting, David Mabuza. But I will agree, he's in a sort of a much weaker position than he was in Nasrec. But the surprise that he pulled in Nasrec is that he had 200 solid votes that were called unity at that point. So we must also look at what happened to those votes that were so-called unity, and whether or not he still has them in his back pocket. If he does, then he has a bargaining chip. But if he has lost them, and he has lost Mpumalanga, then he's in a much weaker position, and Mpumalanga might go with Ronald Lamola as deputy president of the ANC.
Which was a name that was bandied about there unofficially, that at the very least, the province had stated that they do want a candidate in the top 6. So perhaps it could go to Ronald Lamola. But now if we look at Lamola, of late, he did something very interesting yesterday. He seems to have sort of spoken out and elevated a particular statement by the EFF. I don't know if you can have read much into that particular statement of his when he said the ANC should not be guided by the EFF insofar as their utterances around perhaps supporting a leadership of Paul Mashatile. He went on to say that at some point they said he was a very junior to be negotiating with them in the local government elections, and also said he wasn't so trustworthy. What did you make of just the statement itself from Ronald Lamola?
So the initial statement by Malema seemed to be a direct attack or indirect attack, on Ronald Lamola's candidature, because he is competing with Paul Mashatile. When the EFF came out in support of Paul Mashatile, it means that they didn't support him. But it would not be wise for Ronald Lamola to speak out against the EFF in the manner in which he does, because certain factions, the newer factions that have won conference in his own ANC, seem to be cozying up to the EFF and are getting closer and closer with the EFF with the intention of forming coalition governments with the EFF in eThekwini, with Siboniso Duma's faction that side, and the Adiwele faction in Gauteng that wants to take over Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and Johannesburg. So those factions within his own party will not take kindly to him attacking the EFF in the manner that he is doing. So he needs to be careful in how he does that. He needs to be more tactical in how he answers and responds to Julius Malema, and not rather try and slug it out in a street brawl, in a street political brawl with Julius Malema, because it's going to come second best. Julius Malema is well vested in that particular, street brawls and that fraternity. Lamola needs to, obtain the high ground and remain within the high ground and speak from a theoretical aspect of politics, where he speaks through the eye of the needles and all the policy positions of the ANC, and not get involved in this tit for tat that he was involved in with Julius Malema, because it's going to isolate some of the support that you could have been getting from inside the ANC.
And then when we look at Mabuza Kubayi, what do you make of her candidacy at this point? I mean, she's young, she's female, many say she's very competent. What do you make of her?
Look, on principle, as people that have been complaining about the fossilizing leadership within the country that we were led by people who have been leading us since 1994, 28 years ago when we obtained democracy. We must on principle support the candidature of young people. We must again on principle as well support the candidature of women. And Mabuza Kubayi is a young black woman that, seems to be worthy of the position. Might not necessarily agree with her views on politics. I don't agree with the proposals that she tabled at the policy conference of building service stands instead of building homes and houses for her human settlements department. Don't agree with that. I totally reject that. But her candidature needs to be supported. It's a young black woman that is, would break the glass ceiling for this country, and also for the ANC to rise to the position of number 2 within the ANC.
Lukhanyo, we'll be having many of these conversations now building up to that all-important elective conference. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That's political analyst Lukhanyo Vangqa.